Good morning and welcome to Office Hours. Thank you for being here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do on officehours.global. Our first hour, general discussion about production-related questions. The second hour is typically a deeper dive into a subject or a topic that we want to spend more time on. Today, at our last hour, we're going to be talking about capturing and holding viewer attention in a swipe-away world. We'll take a look at some of the best practices in regard to online media production and that sort of thing. We'll be having fun through the whole day. And remember, the show is driven by your questions. So if you haven't figured out how to go through that process, just sneak over to officehours.global and there will be instructions there as to how you can participate. All that said, it's time to dive into our audience questions. So, Mitch, take it away.
My pleasure. David Paskin from Miami, Florida asked, at yesterday's Canva event, they introduced background removal for videos, along with a host of other new features. Thoughts on using Canva in production? And
David wants to weigh in on this himself. Go ahead, David.
Sure. Well, I thought I'd just fill that out a little bit. So Canva announced Canva Docs, which is coming soon. Websites they built on that. They added whiteboards and presentations. Probably the big thing that I was interested in was the video keying. And so I made just a sort of a sample here so you can see the same video. These are stock videos from Canva. And then I just put a color behind it. And then I also uploaded a talking head of myself. And you can see it's not doing a great job on those stock videos. On me, it's a little bit better. And it took about 10 seconds to key out that background. And so I was just curious, I'm a simple guy. I like simple tools. Is something like this, if the quality is okay, is it usable?
Thankfully, we have a keying guru with us. Alex, dive in on this.
You know, I think that the issue is that keying is a really sensitive problem for people mentally when they watch a lot of it. And I think that a lot of the keying that we do now is part of what goes back to what we think of as Zoom fatigue, you know, and the thing is it's a hard edge against something that doesn't, what we're asking our brain to do all the time is just constantly filter out the fact that it's not looking at something real and it feels unreal. It feels unconnected, you know, and one of the things that I feel very firmly about is that when we're looking at things and we're forcing ourselves to just treat them like nothing's happening, our frontal lobe is arguing with our lower brain. Our lower brain wants things to be real. It wants things to be something it understands. It wants things to be connected. And when the frontal lobe is pulling it in one direction and the lower brain isn't moving from what it wants, the space between those, I really do believe, is called depression. You know, that's the delta between the two of what the frontal lobe is processing and what the lower brain needs. You know, and I think that's a big reason why I'm not a big fan of virtual backgrounds, is that I think it actually just creates an emptiness for people that is subconscious. That's the worst kind. Like, subconscious damage is like the worst kind of damage to people because they don't even notice it's happening. You know, like we notice this is why one of the reasons that this is before COVID when we were doing virtual events and hybrid events. We were doing hundreds of hybrid events. And this is why I'm so opinionated about it, is that we had people at hybrid events that would go to these hybrid events over and over again as virtual attendees, and slowly they just drop off. And they had gone to tons of physical events, and then they went to the hybrid events. They gave us good ratings. They actually said it was a good conference, but they slowly just stopped coming. And we had to go back and talk to some of them, and they were like, well, it just didn't seem as important. It's how they felt. It's not what they thought. They thought that the content was there, and their frontal lobe told them this is a good conference. It's a lot of good data. We had good speakers. We had these things, but there was something about it that just felt small to them. And when other things came up, like deadlines and family and weather and everything else, those took precedent. And so we want to keep on trying to find a way to make it important, you know. And I think that those hard edges and little glitches and all kinds of other things create, an increased cognitive load on somebody, and it creates that fatigue that we talk about. And I think that and conference mics do a pretty good job too at creating that kind of, that fatigue that we have there. And so I think that We really want to, that's why we here try to keep our video quality as high as possible. We try to keep our audio quality as high as possible. And a lot of people can watch this for a long time and keep coming back because we're not adding that to the conversation. So I think that, I mean, we may be interested in using Canva for other reasons. Like it's got a lot of cool tools. But it's also why, and it's not just what they're trying to do and what Zoom does and what everybody else does is really hard. A difference key on compressed footage, like that's not something I would ever take a job on to do. I don't even like 422, like uncompressed. Like I'm like, if we have to. So that's the. So I think that they're doing something very hard. They haven't solved it. It could be a long time until they solve it. That feature alone, I probably wouldn't be as excited about.
Courtney wants to weigh in.
Yeah, Alex touched on it. Difference keying is always a disaster, and especially difference keying that's based on motion rather than giving it a still background to remove that it can use for difference keying. It's using, Canvas is using any moving pixels then are sent to the foreground, and pixels that aren't moving are sent to the background. So that creates problems if you're very still at some point. It gets confused when you start to move. And it usually can't keep up with the speed and the compression of transmission, so it always looks crummy. However, background replacement, if you've got a good green screen and you're using a good green screen program before it gets to Zoom or before it gets to Canva, that may be able to be done fine. Actually, Zoom does a really decent green screen replacement. That is not like the difference keying that makes for the awful keys that we see in a lot of the background replacement routines out there. So if you have a green screen background, David Brady, I know, who appears in the camera frequently, is almost always using a green screen background, and most of the time we don't even know it.
Alex, you had another thought?
Yeah, and just one of the reasons David's works so well is because he's really figured out how to match his the vanishing points on his background, lighting, color, those things. So the key, and I think this is also part of the problem with Canva doing it or Zoom doing it, is that no one's paying attention to that. They just have a background plate. They have some background that they grabbed, and then they have whatever lighting they have in their room. And there's a huge difference between lighting and color and everything else. When you get those things pulled together, it definitely gets closer to something that might be acceptable.
All right, let's move on to the next question.
Next one in from David Brady in New York, New York. We were just talking about him. Are there any PTZ cameras out there that can produce that sweet, sweet bokeh without breaking the bank? Looking for something that can live behind an interrotron type prompter, ideally.
And Alex?
Well, that just depends on how big your bank is. I mean, some banks are really small, and if you shake them a little bit, they break, and other ones are really, really big, and there's almost nothing you can do to break the bank. So I think that one of the ones that we're looking at, carefully is still the Canon. I haven't gotten a chance to test it, so I don't know what it looks like. It's about $5,000. What you're looking for is something that's a 1-inch chip or higher, to make that work. The one that all of us are salivating over that we haven't been able to test is the Sony FR7. Now, this is a full-frame PTZ camera. It's not, again, it depends. In the world of PTZs, it doesn't break the bank. In the world of it depends on whether you're buying it for your company or buying it for yourself. For yourself, it's a big number. It's probably $12,000 with the lens, $11,000 with the lens. If you are buying it for a company, that would make sense. At home, you better have a really good reason or a lot of cash floating around. But if you're asking for that really nice bokeh coming from the camera, not being simulated in any way, I think that the high water mark at the moment for the price is the Sony FR7, but it's untested yet. But the plates that we've seen come out of it so far have been stunning. Yeah.
Next question.
Ari Block from Tel Aviv, Israel. It has been suggested that uploading the same video on 2 or more different YouTube accounts would cause issues from YouTube. Is this known to be a problem?
And Alex?
If both the channels claim it, it will be a problem. Whoever claimed it first will own it. So you don't have to claim your videos. You don't have to put, if you can put it, you don't have to do something that, flags it or strikes it or anything else, demonetizes it. You don't, but a lot of those are automatically set in the channel. And so they'll automatically do something as you do it. So if both channels put up something that is going to, flag a video, then it could be an issue where I think it'll just be the first one that does that. Overall, I just wouldn't do it. Like it's not so much that it would break anything. I mean, we've definitely done it. We've put up stuff in multiple channels, and that hasn't really been that big of an issue. But I'd think about why you're doing that. Really, if you're going to do it across multiple channels, what I'd recommend is really think, because we stream to multiple channels. Like multiple, I'm going to stream one event to a lot of them. But really think about whether it makes sense, or whether if you're going to upload a video, that one should be customized for that channel, that viewership, while another one's customized for another viewership and another channel. I think that's a far, customizing it for every platform and for we'll probably talk about this in the second hour, is a way more effective way and a way more organic way. And it feels a lot less spammy, and it's a lot less confusing for the artist. Someone searches for your video and gets 6 of them. It really dilutes the effect for the user. It just doesn't feel authentic.
Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida. When testing mics for employee Zoom use in a home office, what factors would you consider?
We're going to start with Courtney and then head on to Mitchell. Courtney?
Well, first have them go to the audio settings in Zoom and go to the music and professional audio setting and have it turn on high fidelity music mode, and make sure that they turn original sound on, and listen to their background and listen to how much background noise they have in the background, and tell them to get the microphone as close as possible to them without getting, pops and the P's. And then listen to how much background is, and then that will determine whether or not they should leave original sound on or let Zoom try and do noise removal for the background. Then, of course, check your audio level. Make sure they're not set to automatically adjust microphone volume. Get a good volume set for them and have them adjust the volume in Zoom. And if they have an external mixer, have them then, once they set the volume in Zoom to about midway or 3/4 of the way up, then have them adjust the volume on their preamp that is feeding into Zoom, if they're lucky enough to have one. Those are some basic guidelines for me.
Mitchell?
Yeah, I think Courtney's covered most of it there. The important thing is the distance that they place between their face, their mouth, and the microphone. The closer to get to it, if it's that kind of a mic, like a PR40, even an MV7, the closer to get to it, the less issues are going to have with background sound. And the other part, speaking of background sound, please put them in a room where there's not a lot of room tone, a lot of echo, a lot of treatment that could help that. Would change the character of the entire process very significantly.
Nigel?
Yeah, I've done this with a couple of my team, and I've discovered the first and most important thing is not to do anything too complex, because it just throws people off. So an MV7 USB input seems to work really well. The other part of that is to encourage them to start using headphones or earphones or something, whether it's an in-ear or a set of these headphones that we'll like. But I found that with that, I would encourage them to buy an external little volume control for an amp for those headphones to make sure they're loud enough. And when I get both of those right, I see a huge difference. But every time I've got too clever, the barrier is too high.
David Paskin?
I just want to share one experience I just had with a client about the MV7, and that was that Zoom was automatically gaining the mic up so that we were getting good quality and good levels from him. And when he would turn on original sound, the MV7 just wasn't powerful enough to give him the amplification that he needed. And so actually having original sound off for him was really important so that Zoom could gain his mic correctly. Alex?
Yeah, we've used a lot of the MV7s. And the other thing to kind of keep, and we turn them all the way up before we send them out. and they do seem to be enough on our end, but I think a lot of times when we send it out to somebody who hasn't done this, we leave original sound off. And the main reason we'd like to have it to be a higher quality, but there's just so many idiosyncrasies that occur when, you have to really kind of know what you're doing when you have original sound on, in my opinion. The other thing, and we used to turn it on all the time, and then we just had more problems than we had before. It's better to have something that's okay sometimes than great, if especially when you're dealing with someone who hasn't done this before. To what Nigel was talking about also is don't wait until everybody signs on to do it. You take the people who are the most excited about something and you supply them with the gear, and help, and then you spend a lot of energy on them and making sure. Usually that's how you kind of can grow something in a company, is to just find the people who are excited about it and make sure that they're successful doing it. And then you'll get people that were kind of thinking about it, and then you'll get people who disagreed. At some point, someone will feel left out, and they'll jump in.
Andy, a lot of great information there. Hopefully that helped you. Boy, next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, how would you compare Ecamm to mimoLive?
And we're going to start with David.
We should really start with Tony because I know that he's really used both, but I'll just offer that from my limited experience, I would offer two differences. One is that mimoLive has companion iPhone, iPad apps, which Ecamm doesn't, which is a loss, unfortunately, for the Ecamm community. The other thing that I would offer is that generally, I think that mimoLive is really geared more toward production, whereas Ecamm Live is geared more toward streaming. So with mimoLive, you have a really nice video switching interface. With Ecamm Live, it's really focused more on scene structure and moving from one scene to the other.
Tony.
I really don't have much to add to what David has already said, other than the fact that Oliver is a friend of the community, and he will allow you to play with mimoLive for about 30 days at no cost. And so that is a way in which you can really do a comparison in terms of both products. I like them both. I continue to be at David's trainings on Tuesdays, and I will continue to do that. And I am going to continue to be in both worlds.
Excellent. Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I've used both of them a fair bit. The way I look at it is the Ecamm's considerably less expensive. It is much faster to get up to speed and get going. But there's a little bit of a ceiling there compared to what mimoLive. mimoLive is going to let you do an enormous number of things and build very complex events, maybe sometimes too complex on my end. But I have been able to do things in mimoLive that I definitely can't do in Ecamm. But I have a lot of friends who get into this, and Ecamm is perfect. It does exactly what it needs to do. They're not trying to go further than what it does. And so if you can afford it, a lot of people, if they haven't done a lot of production and they're not willing to learn how to do it, I just say they should just use Ecamm. like you should, you'll in an hour or two, you'll be doing a show, and you'll be happy with it. For me, mimoLive took a long time for me to get around. The interface is very different than something, there is not a common place to look. There's no other app that runs like that. And once you get used to it, you're like, oh, this is pretty cool. Okay, Oliver thought this out. It was, but when you start, it took Oliver 10 years to get me, or not maybe 5 years to get me to use it. I kept on opening it and going, I don't understand this. And that was me. So I think that, but now that I use it on a Mac, the mimoLive is the software of choice for me, because it's a Swiss Army knife that I can just open up and, I want to do this and I want to pull this in and I want to go here and everything else. So for the smaller shows where we don't use hardware, it's definitely my choice, but I don't recommend it to everyone. I kind of gauge what their technical skills are before I tell them which one to go towards.
And Nigel wants in on this.
Yeah, I really like Ecamm for things I'm having to do myself and beyond if I'm doing a podcast, because I can pretty much preset it up on my Stream Deck and hit a few buttons without watching. Bring people in on interview mode, and it's very horsey, ducky. It's not very complicated, but it's very easy to run on your own.
I just need to say I need to use horsey, ducky more in my life.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. That's great idiot. Yes, fabulous. Next question.
And this is from the 7th Scroll in Brooklyn, New York. Morning, guys, in a studio setup. How many of you use bicolor lights, especially the tungsten settings, versus daylight-only lights as your main light source?
And to start us off is our friend Ken Jordan, who's here to help us the second hour. Thank you for being here, Ken. I popped in and asked him because he knows so much about our second hour topic, but you got this one. Take it away.
Thanks, Bill. So we actually use full color light, so we can adjust to any range because of that. I'm a massive fan of the aperture lights because of the quality of their light output. But yeah, to answer the question, actually, we use their full color range of lights rather than just the tungsten or the daylight versions.
Courtney?
I'm being the budget conscious one. I'm using the Neewer. This is one that I'm using. It's a dual color. It goes from 32 to 56, and it's continuously adjustable. So you don't just select the color temperature. You can adjust any color temperature in between those two, and it has a high CRI. This is an 18-inch model. They have 15-inch models and 12-inch models, and they're edge-lit, so they're very smooth. They're thin. They run on batteries, and I've been pretty happy with mine.
Mitchell?
Yeah, I'm sorry to reach over for it. I'm using a light panel Astra. It's a soft panel. There it is right there. And it's a bicolor, which means that you can adjust it inside the daylight range and just give it a little punch of tungsten if you need it for your to match. I kind of balance for daylight, and then I just give it a little tweak so I look like I got a tan, which I don't. But the Astra is an interesting, expensive key light to use, but if you spend your money on your key light and it's a soft light, then you don't have to spend as much on all the other guys in here.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, I'm on the same boat. I go with the bicolor light that I can switch on and off to kind of get these different colors. So right now, if I have it at the 5400, just to kind of give you guys the extreme examples, here's what happens if we bring it all the way down. You can see what happens to my face at 2000. So notice the white in that white object below my PTZ camera. So you want to keep things accurate, especially if you're holding up clothing or things like that. Like I'm wearing a gray shirt right now. So if my camera's set to 4800 or 5400 on my white balance, if I dial it in, then that should be an accurate white. If this is my main light source, that might be getting contaminated with a little bit of this blue, but you can see what happens if we go in the other direction as well, and we go all the way up to 10,000. This is an Aperture P300C. This thing will actually do all colors of the rainbow. So, I got purples, and these are presets. And then I don't want to go into the paparazzi one; it'll strobe you to death. But there's lots of cool settings in this. Ken has one of these as well, but pretty cool light. If you can get one. And there's different effects that you might want. You see it on Good Morning America, where they have the outdoor blue light coming in because they're white balance for tungsten, and you could use that for effect. So it just depends on what kind of look that you want.
And I also should mention that if you have a setting on your camera for automated white balance, do not use it, because you're going to be chasing your tail. You're going to be trying to warm something up, and the camera is going to be constantly trying to cool it back down in response to that. So that's a little annoying. But if you have a manual white balance set, you're in great shape with these multicolored lights. Guy wants to pop in on that.
Yeah, and while I have it up here, the other nice thing is while you're doing this, if you have scopes like this is Omniscope, you'll see that flesh tone colored line. That's that. Let me see if I can get my mouse all the way over there. Sorry, it's got to span 4 computers, but you can see what I'm talking about is this line. You get the idea. It's this one right here. And if I make those adjustments, you can see what happens to my flesh tone line if I'm out of whack. So these scopes will help you either in camera. The joy of Omniscope is that I could be doing color corrections in my software, whether it be mimoLive or vMix. And I have this Gnome Omniscope set up to connect to my output of my vMix setup here, output 1. So it's nice to have this software. I mean, it's a tremendous tool to be able to see these and know that you're accurate or not accurate as far as your color is concerned. So I'm going to put it back at 5400, and I should be right in there. And then, like Mitch, I like to give myself a little bit of a tan, so I'll drop down to like 4600, and that should get me right where I want to be.
So for those of you who haven't been around to a lot of office hour shows, we've occasionally talked about color balancing. The skin tone line and vector scopes are one of the tools that we've talked about a good little bit, and I'm sure we will in the future. But for right now, we have to move on. Next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. And Paul asks, explain the new After Hours rollout and where it is headed.
Well, nobody's kicked in on this. Alex, can I convince you to talk a little bit about where you think it might be going?
Sorry, sometimes I forget that I'm not the host, and I just don't raise my hand, and so I sorry about that. Yeah,
that's all right. I tossed the ball to you.
Yeah. So there's a lot that's going to go on with After Hours. After Hours we're kind of growing it over time, and you'll find that I do things very slowly so that we can kind of figure things out. Obviously, now that after hours is separated from office hours, it means that they can run separately. So people could be in after hours right now. Maybe they are. I don't know. And watching this, what we're going to do is we're still going to have there's some current limitations to how Zoom manages breakout rooms. That until they change that, we'll still have the hosts in a separate meeting because we can't control access on a breakout by breakout room. So, but we are planning to funnel the show into so the host will still be here, but we'll funnel a watch room as a breakout room into after hours, and then we'll also probably have a behind the scenes version so you can listen to it and look at it as well. And there's a test. And Mickey, let me know that there is a test viewing room in after hours right now, so you can see it there. So we're kind of working through that process. Anyway, so so that's kind of where we're headed as far as office hours goes. After hours, you're going to see us continue to add more labs. We're going to add more. I think that probably much of there's going to be some point where somebody is doing something, or people are doing things together. Sometime 8, 9, 10 hours a day. There's different things that are going on at different times. And so you'll have to kind of keep track of it. We're working on a better scheduling process so that you know what's actually happening there. I mean, right now we send it out in the daily list, but sometimes, those are still moving parts. We are planning to, when possible, run those test frames so that there'll be a fairly persistent ZoomISO room that is going to have 12 people just talking to each other as participants, so that people can test ZoomISO and make sure that it's working. We're very bullish on ZoomISO, and so we're going to make sure that there's a place for us to test that. And then there'll be extra labs. Obviously David's been doing a great lab on Ecamm. Ken here has been doing one on web design. We've got Elle on doing Isadora, and that I believe today is moving back to 9. Bill is doing one at noon. So you'll on Fridays. And so those are, and you'll see that, anybody who's interested, by the way, I mean, if you're interested in giving back to the community in that way, it's very much appreciated. And we'll keep on experimenting with that as we go. And those will be in breakout rooms. And so I do feel like office hours will be kind of the tip of the iceberg, and after hours is this giant community of people doing things. And, I think that we'll be doing, Hasmukh and Damayanti will be doing cooking in a room, and we'll have other things. We'll be constantly kind of building and doing a lot of different aspects of production and testing and everything else. And I hope to be more involved over time with that as well. So there's a lot of stuff happening there, but that's kind of the, more than just the hangout place. That's going to be where there's a lot of things happening and people learning together, globally. So I think it's going to be really, at some point, why don't we call this office hours? Why don't we just call the whole thing after hours? so anyway, but it allows office hours to remain a somewhat more tight, focused show that is kind of the, if you just want to get 2 hours of, Q&A, this is the place to come. But if you're want to ruminate on things and trade notes with people and hang out and talk about things and figure things out together, then that's where after hours is going to go.
Every time I visited after hours, when I finished, I feel like I'm smarter than I was when I went in. It's a great community. Let's move on to the next question.
And it's from me. What is the best DA converter to get audio from USB? It must have XLR balanced out.
We're going to start with Mitchell.
Yeah, I'm in the process of rebuilding my... Sorry about the garbage guys are out here. They'll be to you in a minute, Courtney. The Linux device that I'm using, the great J River Media Center, and I'm building up my music library. It's why my meters aren't bouncing around up on the top here. And I just want to confirm that the very best way to get that audio back into my sound system via some type of digital analog converter that uses USB 2.
Nigel.
I suspect Alex will give you better suggestions than me, but I am going to offer you one thought for your setup, that I have a Clark Technic 3030T, which allows me to go into Dante. So you have a Dante setup. That's a pretty interesting way to go from analog to Dante. Nice. Alex?
Yeah, and we use the Avios for a lot of the Dante stuff if we're not using Dante Virtual Sound Card, which is not 100% stable. So it is useful to, we have a lot of DVS running around, but we do, if you want a couple channels there, we do that. As far as purely the question, a DA, USB to XLR, I have a strong opinion about this in that it is still, after over a decade, the USB Pre-2. It is a tank. It is, it doesn't have any software. It just shows up and it puts out, your balanced outputs. And I still think that there's nothing as good at, now it's expensive. It's $800 or $900 or something like that, for a USB output. But I have, at one time I owned over 60 of them, we use them in everything, and so, it's just this ultimate glue. That is still, kind of a warm blanket when I had problems. I was having problems with some audio recently, getting it out of a computer, and I was like, okay, I'm just putting a USB pre in here and make this go away. I'm just gonna, I just found an old one and put it in there and after, and that thing has been underwater. I might have been run over, thrown around, gone all over the world. It's probably almost 15 years old, and I plugged it in, and all my audio troubles disappeared.
That's nice to be able to say about a product. Stefan, do you have something real quick? We're about to move on, but you want to sneak in on a last thought?
Just a question about what Alex just said. Doesn't this thing have XLR ins, but no XLR outs?
No, it has XLR, balanced XLR in and balanced XLR out. It has the in, if you use the XLRs, have dual analog limiters in them, so that you're not going to that's one of the main reasons we use them all the time, is because it'd be very hard to get distortion, overmodulation or distortion. You might feel it softly hitting that limiter, but it's not there. It has it also has TRS in, and it even has RCA in and out, and it has Toslink as well plugged into it. It's about as much stuff you could pack into something as possible. It's got, the way you change its settings is there's dip switches on the back that you flip. So you have to have a little tweaker in there, and you tweak those little dip switches to get what you need. It'll do 48 volt. It does. It can map channel 1 to channel 2 on inputs. There's a lot of different ways to configure it, and it's just it's a beast of it's still, after all these years. I always want them to update it, but I don't even know where they would go. There's a couple little things I'd like out of it, but it's a pretty powerful little thing. Again, for doing the one thing it needs to do, and you can send it out all pre-configured with dip switches, and how it's going to work. It is there's not something I plugged it in and it changed what it was going to do, or someone updated it or whatever. When it goes out with the dip switches set, it's going to do the thing that it's going to do. It's really a cool little box.
Yeah, you make me want to buy one.
Our producers, though, have done a great job, and we still have more than a dozen questions to get to. So we're going to move on here. Next question.
David Brady from New York again, looking to back up an Android-based set-top media player before repurposing. Are there any utilities that will produce a system image of the base OS and apps so I can restore it if need be? I'm not well-versed in Droid.
Courtney Gooden is going to step in.
Depends on what brand it is, what you're using, and how you're going to, and why you need to back it up and why you want to change it. If it's a Raspberry Pi based, you can just pop out the SD card that contains the entire operating system and everything else, and pop in a new one that's formatted with whatever new setup you want to use. Raspberry Pi is the most flexible Android media top, but if it's like a Fire Stick or a Roku stick or something like that, those streaming media players, just get another one, because you can get a new Fire Stick for $25 from Amazon, or $29 from Amazon, so 4K version. So I would just do that. And because I ran into this problem with the Roku, because Spectrum has their app, and then through some type of legal agreement, they're not allowed to sell their app anymore on the App Store. So if you have it, it'll work. But it's not available anywhere, so I have to keep this old Roku around because it has that app on it, and I can use it on the Spectrum TV. My Spectrum TV license works on it, but I can't ever erase it because there's nowhere to download it.
Hopefully that helped you, David. Next question.
Next question from Ryan Rademan in Chicago. Figma is being acquired by Adobe. Will this benefit the Figma or Adobe user communities?
Alex.
If Adobe's previous purchases are any guide, it'll probably have some benefit for the Adobe user community. It'll be adding to what if you get the everything package. you're going to have more resources to do that. Probably will not be a great experience for the Figma users. And that's typically how this has worked out. So the Figma users that are currently there probably will be a little frustrated from what they had before.
I hear that. All right, next question.
The Seventh Scroll in Brooklyn, New York. Morning, guys. What are your top 3 quietest lights for production, including price range, if possible?
Okay, we've got about 45 seconds each for our people who've raised their hands. So, David, start us off.
They're a little pricey, but I'm a huge fan of the Elgato key lights. They're about $200 each. I've got 2 of them on my desk, and they're completely silent.
Silent is as quiet as you can get. Ken?
Yeah, I use the Aperture P300Cs. It's my main light and the light at the back. It's a bit overkill, but it is can run silently because I'm not pushing it that much. And they are, I think you can get them from the DVE store for, looking at the price, $1,899 each.
Mitchell?
I have the aforementioned light panel, Astra Softboxs. It's a 1x1. It's bicolor. And like Ken just said, I'm not pushing it very hard. It has a fan in it, but I have never heard that fan come on, or if it has, I haven't heard it.
And I have gone a different direction. I'm not spending $1,000 on any of my lights here. I think I have a couple of key lights right in front of me that were from Neewer, and they're probably $40 a piece. I do have a softbox that's hanging over me that has a Tota LED in it that probably runs maybe $250, $300, but that's as far as I went. So I just want to make sure that everybody who's watching the show knows that in order to do high quality Zoom, you don't have to go with these things. Those lights that people mentioned are excellent lights, particularly if you want to do production on one hand and then come in and put them into your Zoom setup because you have them. Those are great. Some of the lights that we've been talking about, literally professional crews use for remote shooting. You don't have to go that high, but you can certainly if you want to. Tony, you had a thought?
I have the GVM's 800D. I got them for Christmas from my sons as a gift, and they go for $350. They are great. They work with Bluetooth. I can control them, and they're pretty good to look at. Recommended by office hour members.
Yeah, this is a great era for lighting because there's so many more choices than there used to be with, and the manufacturers have gotten color balance and the rest of the things that used to be a real problem for LEDs pretty much under control now. So there's a lot of both LED and COB chip on board light emitters that are pretty affordable and do a good job of creating light that's very valuable for Zoom. So let's move on. Next question.
Al Trivet in Carmichael, and question is thoughts on the excellent Michael Krasny interview of Ken Burns, Lynn Novick, and Sarah Botstein.
I was really bummed. I was working last night and had to miss it. Alex, what?
We're trying to turn it over pretty quickly, so we should have it out later, possibly as early as tomorrow. It is really good. He's on the interview trail. And so he was on CNN, like right after our show, he was on CNN with Anderson Cooper. So he's and he's talking. This is about their new PBS, their new documentary is about the Holocaust from the perspective of the U.S. So how did the U.S. react to the Holocaust and the places that we missed, didn't do a very good job and everything else, and why. And so I think that it was. I think of all the ones, we were watching a bunch of these to figure out what we should ask him and so on and so forth. And I think Michael Krasny possibly pulled off the best interview of this spin for him. So when you see it, and again, a reminder, those we're going to send out an email. I'm a little behind. We have a huge shipment going out today that we were working until midnight last night on, or some people later. I would highly recommend. Gray Matter is really turning into something pretty special, and it's free for office hours members. And so you can, there's a sign up for the Discord or the sign up for the membership. It's free for office hours. You don't have to put your credit card in. It says that, but you don't have to. I would highly recommend signing up. We'll send out an email about it, but I would sign up for it. And these discussions just keep getting better and better. But I think that, Ken Burns had done, I think, maybe 20 of these with Michael Krasny before, Gray Matter. So the team really all knew each other. I think that was part of why this was so comfortable, but it was a great conversation. And so we'll have it out. And it's really fun because if you do it live, you can actually ask questions and they get into the show. So it's a really interesting, that's probably about third to half of the show is answering questions from the viewers. So it's pretty useful. Anyway,
I can't even imagine what Michael Krasny's Rolodex contacts list in the modern era looks like. It must be insane.
It is so deep. I mean, it's like we're still organizing. It just came up like, oh yeah, we could get Ken Burns on. We've had him on a lot of times on the show, and we were like, okay. I even, for a minute I was there with in the pre-show, and Ken Burns was there, and I was talking to him a little bit about stuff and doing a little chit chat. And then I decided that even I don't get shaken very much. I mean, I work with heads of state, but I am for 30 years, a massive Ken Burns fan. And I was like, you need to walk away before you start gushing. I was just like, okay, I'm going to go now. Because I was just going to be like, I so wanted to tell him like Roebling was one of my favorite documentaries, which was his first documentary. I was like, the one on Roebling was like my favorite. And then the Civil War got better. And then, and it was just like, and I was like, okay, I got to go. I don't be that guy. So anyway, I very rarely have that effect. So
know how you feel. I ran into B.B. King at an airport once and it just shut me down. I was like, I can't say anything to this guy.
I have to admit that usually that's what I do is I just stop talking. Is like just don't go there.
Wise strategy.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right, let's move on to the next question.
It's from Colin Mulcahy in Dublin, Ireland. With ZoomISO version 2, I'm updating gear. What pro audio hardware, cards, digital mixer, etc., should I be looking at for outputting individual Zoom audio channels to a desk for mixing Zoom Plus local inputs? Should I be going all in on learning Dante?
Alex.
The Dante setup is pretty powerful, that goes out of it, and you can get all the channels that you want out of there to define those. And so I think that Dante would be worth definitely learning. I am playing, and I haven't been completely successful yet. I'm playing with, all the tests that we've been doing had been all Dante. And so I understood that. But I was like, I really want to do this all in one place. And I'm starting to work on getting Loopback to work so that you could theoretically have a mixer. I mean, one of the things I'm thinking about right now is having Loopback go into Mixbus or something like that, where I can pull it all in and then do the mixing there. I'm going to see if that works. I'm not 100% sure that'll work there, but it also means you could record ISOs on Audio Hijack and have it all be kind of self-contained. But I think that Dante is an incredible solution. When you talk about, again, if we go back to DVS, being able to push it all there and then push it all into a mixer. One of the things that I've been looking at, if I'm not happy with the software solutions for mixing, is going to be a Midas Core, which is it's basically a 1U, Dante. This is basically an X32 without any inputs other than an Ethernet cable, and so I'm considering that as one of the possibilities there.
Mitchell.
Highly recommend Dante. I sort of dipped my toe in it when I went with my 205. It's doing my monitor mix. It's doing the mic routing. It's just one of those things that you think it might be complicated. Oh, another system. And the reality is it's simple, intuitive, and easy, and you should be using it.
And Guy.
Yeah, keep in mind that if you're using ZoomISO with Dante, you're going to need the additional power of ZoomISO Pro. So you're jumping from Lite, that's $29 a month, to $45 a month. So down here, when you look at what the unchecked boxes are for Lite, advanced audio interface, Dante virtual sound card, loopback, etc. So you do want to keep that in mind if you're going to go the Dante route, that it's going to be more money every month.
Alex has another note.
Yeah, and what I will say is that for most of us, almost everybody here is going to want to use the Pro version. It's not going to be the Pro version is going to have the high bandwidth mode. It's going to have Dante. It's going to have a bunch of things there. You're not going to end up using that. And so you do have to think about that. But right now, this is the best reason to get into the beta right now is because it's free. So you can figure out whether you can get up to speed. A lot of us are going to be getting up to speed. This week was a little hectic because of a loadout for us, but starting next week, I'm trying to build the Gray Matter show inside of ISO. And so I'm going to be building it all out. And I want to have, because it's an audio only show, I can experiment a lot. So I'm going to be experimenting with doing it into mimoLive, into I just got an ATEM, thing. So like all these other to be playing with how to really push all the envelopes with ISO in a small way, not in the giant office hours way. And I'll be doing all of that. I mean, I'll be coming in and talking about that. In after hours and during those labs, and then we'll be figuring it out together. So you really, if you're in the community, you really want to download ISO, the version 2 beta, and start digging into it. It's a lot different than version 1, which I found a bit opaque. I was really excited about it. I knew what it could do, but I was like, oh, I don't, but version 2 is incredible, and so I would definitely download it and get, again, we're doing tests. Right now, there's no labs. We're not teaching anything just yet, but you can go in between 1 and 3 this week, and then we're going to move it to 10 to noon every day starting next week because some of our European partners were requesting an earlier time slot. So it'll come after our morning slots, and before our afternoon slots. It'll be there. And again, we're going to give you some resources to test it, with the 12 people talking. So I think that you definitely want to, this is really important for our community, is to get up to speed. This is going to change our shows, whether they're physical or online, dramatically. And I think that you're either going to be using ZoomISO version 2 or you're going to be competing with people who are, and I don't think you're going to be able to be honest with you. So I think that we really want to get on it.
Excellent. All right. Next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. Paul asks, what are the total cost of IBC in euros and manpower, and what would it take to do it next year? Same with Cinegear and NAB, profit and loss?
And Ken Jordan's going to start us off.
Yeah, I think Jonas did a back of a napkin calculation of about, I think it was about 46,000 euros, but he hadn't spoken to me yet on adding into that cost. In terms of profit and loss, obviously financially, it's one thing, but from a knowledge base, for me is an enormous profit. It's the learning experience and being amongst the crew there was invaluable.
And I think the show is a thanks to all of you. And Ken was boots on the ground there for us. And it was just so much a joy to be able to sit where we are and be able to experience something like IBC from remotely. I've wanted to go for decades, never had a chance. I got knocked out of the 1 year I had flights booked by a client, and I've always been sad about that. So this was the next best thing. So thank everybody who worked on that. Mitchell, you had a thought.
I think it's a great exercise and a great question, Paul, because we need to know the value of the things that we do. And if we analyze it and assess a value, even though it's an all volunteer staff and no, we're not looking necessarily to generate a profit, we need to know what the value of it is because, for example, if Alex is going to negotiate with somebody for booth space and they start throwing numbers at us, then we can throw numbers back at them as to the value of our services.
Absolutely. All right, next question.
David Brady in New York for Nigel, looking for blind automation on a budget. What are your thoughts on DIY solutions like Tilt by Smarter Home?
And our first response is from Nigel Dessau.
Yeah, so I don't know this particular product, but I want to give you a couple of things you should think through when going for automated shades. And by the way, when you don't have automated shades and you have manual shades, 80% of the time people never change them. So if you have a nice view, you don't get to see it. Some quick things to think about. Think through how many you actually want. One looks great. If you think you're going to do more than one, you're going to add a lot of complexity to the situation. Next one, think about what platform you're going to have to operate them. Is it another remote? Is it another app? Will it integrate with what you've got? If they're battery operated, batteries run down really fast, particularly if you open and close them a lot, and charging can be really hard. Think through the materials. If you don't particularly care about the materials, then some of these cheaper solutions have very plasticky looking, or they look great in the pictures. When you see them, they won't look as good. The jump between manual and automated is quite high when you do it. The jump between automated average and automated good is not as high as going from manual to automated. And I would, if you're doing a lot of windows and it really matters how they look, then I would probably not do a simple DIY solution. If you've got one window and you don't really care, these things are great.
Good advice. Let's move on. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, I'm trying to help my cousin, who's a lawyer, look and sound better on Zoom, but he's still learning about the technology. Would a Shure MV7 be the best start for him, or would it be better to start with a mic like an SM7 and audio interface?
And Alex and Mitchell, and can you hang on to about a minute apiece? Alex?
MV7, 100%. We've tested now 10 or 12 mics. If you're using it as a USB to the, to what's there, MV7 is the answer in my opinion.
And Mitchell.
A great beginning microphone. I agree 100% with Alex, and no interface required because it's built into the microphone.
Great. Moving on.
Santa Bart Gaffney from Oconomowoc. And I have a question for the panel that requires more than the characters allowed in Mukana. Can I stretch the question across multiple requests?
And the man who knows is Alex Lindsay.
No. Don't do that. so it's very confusing for us, because they get voted on separately and then we don't see them together. They're just randomly going out. We don't see one of two or three. Also, we just really found that for the velocity of the show, that having longer questions actually made it much harder for us to answer them. So think about how you can take your ideas and break them up into multiple questions and send them out that way rather than trying to make them all tie together.
Mitchell, real quick.
Yeah, I think Santa Bart is struggling with lighting his green screen. He's got a great green screen on a trampoline that he's stretched out on the wall. So because of the complexity of his question, I think he's having problems with it.
It's really an after hours, lab or something. So I can see the need for green screen building up some kind of lab in after hours. So we'll see if we can't get to that sometime in the near future.
Next question.
Colin Mulcahy in Dublin, Ireland, client requesting to do an interview shoot with host on a set in studios sitting in a chair and a guest on Zoom to be used as podcast and videocast. What mic setup would you choose for host? Anything to be aware of for Zoom audio?
Alex.
It depends. So can you see the mic is one question, and can you use an IFB? So if you can see a mic, you can put something that's a big radio mic in front of them, and then you have a lot of options there. And if you can use an IFB, then you don't have to worry about talkback. We've had a lot of different ones. So if they're a politician, you can't put an IFB in. They don't want to look like someone's feeding them answers. And so we have to put the speaker behind them, and then we put a lab in front of them, and then their body blocks enough of it that we can we can use basically Dante, Dugan auto mixing to get rid of it. The other option is for us to have a speaker and a shotgun on the right by the shotgun goes forward as close as we can to them, and the speaker goes underneath a teleprompter. And the shotgun will tend to cancel that out relatively effectively with the help of Dugan Auto Mix. And so those are the kind of the things that we've tended to do to make those things work. And then, of course, this is where you may want to really start thinking about Zoom. With meetings, you should be able to do ISO records just inside of Zoom. It does not work in webinar. The button clicks, but it's a bug. So it doesn't. Don't do that. But you can record those separately. So record the audio coming back as well as the mic, the local mic, and you can do that into a mix pre or whatever. But this is also a great example of where we're planning to start using ZoomISO version 2.
Just one other note, no swivel chairs because they will swivel and squeak. And I would probably just use a mic stand and a boom arm and just fix it right in front of them and try to be as simple as possible. But Alex had a lot of great advice there. Let's move on. Next question.
Jeff Cohen from Miami Beach, Florida. Follow up to Mission Impossible style video loops, swap out in Zoom. Agree 100% with answers not to do it, especially in a professional context. More theoretical curiosity on how it could be done. What's playing the video loop, how to make the seamless switch, etc.
And Courtney.
Well, in order to make it seamless switch, your first frame has to match your last frame. So when you're creating a loop, you have to end up in exactly the same position. If you're going to be showing someone who's just kind of looking in the camera like they're listening, it's fairly easy to do with the QuickTime player because it has a loop mode where it will play forward and then reverse, and then forward and then reverse. So it gets to the last frame of the video file, and then it just changes direction seamlessly back to the first frame, and then it changes direction back. So as long as the action in the frame doesn't look weird running backwards, if you're just sitting there and maybe blinking your eyes every now and then to make it look like you're alive, you'll never see the loop transition. So that's the easiest way to do it.
And Alex, real quick.
slightly less easy way to do it would be to take an image of yourself and put it up and make it half, however you want to do it, make it half transparent so that you can see it as a model of where you need to sit. And at the beginning of your little loop, and make the loop longer. The longer the loop you make, the less chance people are going to see it. But get your head kind of in the space of where it needs to be inside of that onion skin, so to speak. And then do whatever you're going to do, but make sure you come back to that. And when you see yourself coming back to wherever that is that lines up, take it into After Effects, use a morphing tool and morph between the two frames over a couple frames, and no one will ever notice that you're looping. So I wouldn't recommend doing it, but that's how you would build a truly seamless frame without a rocker.
And moving on, John Snyder. Oh, I'm sorry. Next question. I got back into reader role for a moment.
It's all yours, Bill. John Snyder from Reno, Nevada. If I wanted to learn more about designing instructional material on a Saturday morning, where might I turn?
And Tony Mobley is going to go for this.
So the first place that I would suggest is the Office Hours Discord for education. That is the first place that I would recommend that you go. There are a lot of professional educators there. They continue to have interaction, even though we've done a little pause on education on Saturdays. They are still doing a lot of corresponding, sharing information, sharing resources. So that's the first place that I would suggest you go.
All right, Tony Mobley, thank you very much. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is here. With all the advances in distributed and virtual production, why do you think the concert industry went right back to the old model when concerts and tours returned?
We'll hear from Alex and Nigel. Alex?
Well, because that's what's familiar, and there's a lot of money involved. So people want to go back to what they know how to make money. But you're seeing the cracks appearing. Demi Lovato said she can't do this anymore yesterday. Justin Bieber dropped out. I think House of Youth dropped out. Now that it's being seen as okay, this is what happens is a bunch of folks that are fairly high profile. The artists after the first 10 or 15 shows hate this experience. Just so you know, they love to talk about how great it is to see their fans. That's all marketing. And so they, because they need to make the money, they like to see the fans cash. So it's the one place they're sure they can make money. But you're seeing the model is crashing. These are the cracks going across the ice right now. So I don't think that you're going to see concerts in the way that they've been for much longer. They're going to have to find other business models, because when Demi Lovato says she can't do it anymore, you've got and Justin Bieber, and these are big names. These aren't and so a lot of artists, if they see that it's okay for them to say, no, I can't do this anymore, they haven't felt like that. I mean, a lot of the artists, they just keep taking whatever medication people give them, keep drinking drinks to keep their voice going, try to get through it to make the money that they need. Now that they're kind of going, it's okay to say no, I think you'll just keep on seeing this thump of, every couple of weeks, every month or so, a big artist saying, I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah.
Interesting. Next. Oh, no, Nigel wants to weigh in. Excuse me.
Yeah, I was just going to say they do it because that's their business model, and people are very bad at innovating their own business models. As someone who went to see Michael Bublé last night, I can tell you there will always be an audience for an experience with a lot of people. They may not want to do 150 on the tour, but there's always going to be that, and that's going to get more and more expensive. But, last week I went to see ABBA perform as holograms, and I paid a lot of money for those tickets, and it was a great experience.
How was it? I know that we're running a little over, but you got to tell me how the ABBA thing was.
It's phenomenal. It's very clever.
So they're on LED wall? They're on an LED wall?
They are on an LED wall, but the critical point of the success of this is the combination of the lighting in the room with the lighting on the screen makes that disappear. That what's an obvious thing disappears because of the way they've integrated the lighting.
Yeah, that's been our assumption. And so it did work. It pulled it off. You felt like you were there.
No question. Beginning, it's a bit strange, but I can tell you that people behaved like they were at a concert, and it's done. So you see them on the stage at the sides, but you also see them on big screens at the side.
Yeah,
so
it's crazy
from a different angle. It's bizarre.
Yeah, they're cutting a show of it. Yeah, it's cool.
I wish I could have seen that. That sounds like it's absolutely cool. We can sneak in a couple more here, so let's go to the next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. Cliff Figallo, director of The Well, just passed. I guess it was on September 11th. He was truly one of the architects of the online community. Has anyone heard of him? And
Mitchell, you weighed in. Did you know the gentleman in question?
I don't know him personally. I think he was associated with the original Whole Earth catalog. I may be wrong, but that is a classic. It's sort of the roots of the online social media, if you stop to think about how that grew out to become an online powerhouse.
That's interesting. So I must have worked with Stuart Brand in those early San Francisco days when that was a big deal. So it's sad to see anybody pass, particularly somebody who had that kind of influence. Can we, I think we can sneak one more in. I mean, we're at the top of the hour and we're going to dive in pretty quickly to our next topic, but let's do one more, then we'll lock it off.
Santa Bart Gaffney in Oconomowoc, and he is struggling with a green screen on my ATEM Extreme. Has 4 Neewer 2-foot softboxes, 2 Neewer dimmable LED lights. After hours helped, but the results were still, not quite what he expected. Some saying different lighting and or use of a Blackmagic Design Ultimat 12 HD Mini could help.
And Alex, real quick.
Yeah, and if people put it into the second hour or talk to Josh, I'm happy to do a green screen. I think I did it once before, but I'm happy to do it again in the second hour and answer questions and show some examples. But here's the thing is that an Ultimat's great, but the first thing you want to do is get your basic ball handling skills handled. Like, how do we get a very good green screen? The trick is all in the lighting. It's actually not in the software. And so the trick to that software is to the lighting is that you want it to be very consistent. So if you look at your Luma, so to do a good green screen, you need scopes. Figure it out. Omniscope is a great one to put in there, but you have to be able to see scopes. You can do an okay green screen without it. You cannot do a great green screen without scopes. Now, we used to do 10 hours a week of green screen. So if anything went wrong, it was a very expensive mistake for us. And so we spent a lot of time getting this right. When you look at the scopes, you want to see in the Luma at about 70% a fairly straight line. It should be thin and it should be straight across. If it's thick or it's at an angle like this or it's an angle like this, anything like that, that means that you're using up all of these greens when you have to pull the green screen. So the wider this is, the wider this line is, and the less even it is in the Luma scope, the more greens that you're giving up. And when you give up those greens, what you're giving up is edge detail. So any kind of variance in the screen, you want that screen to be as flat as possible. The second thing that we do is, you want to separate the foreground from the background as much as you possibly can. The further back you get, the less edge erosion that you're going to have when you do it, because as you go further back, only the light rays that are going this way, as you get closer, light rays that are going, because light rays are going every direction, they're hitting the top of the edges, and that's our wrap. That's more problematic. So you want to separate that out to make sure that works. You want to light your foreground and your background with separate lights. You want to have that back green to be as flat as possible. And then the other thing that we do, if we can totally separate the foreground from the background, is we do what we call green on green bulbs or green filters on top of it. And what that means is that when you look at your RGB parade, your green is way up here and your red and blue are down here, and having that separation there between these, so if you have the blue up here, the red down here, you're going to have a much easier time separating because the math is you're taking a mix, an average between the red and the blue, and then you're subtracting it from the green. So that's that's how you're going to actually make that work. So those are the basics. When you get that working, Ultimat will take it to the next level. You do what I just did there. Most keyers will do a pretty good job. Ultimat will key glass with liquid and everything else. And so if you hand Ultimat what it needs, it'll really rock it. So you can get an okay key without that, but those are the basics. And if I do a second hour, it'll just be 20 times more of that.
Okay, we're going to sneak on to the next topic because the top of the hour today, we're doing something a little bit different. This was the focus on capturing and holding viewer attention in a swipe away world. That's what it was billboarded as. And because that's what everybody is facing. I mean, it's a scrolling and swiping and attention deficit environment that we live in. And the time to achieve any kind of viewer engagement has just really never been shorter. So getting viewers to stop and engage with content is a problem because there's so much streaming by. We're going to try to gather some ideas on best practices today, or at least avoid worst practices. And to help us, I've done two things. First of all, I asked Ken Jordan, our friend who handles the website here, to stop by because he knows a ton about this topic, about what works and what doesn't work on the website of things. We're also going to try a little experiment to start things off. You people have probably all seen word clouds. It's a popular thing. It's a type of survey where you ask a group to type in keywords on a topic, and then the software creates a graphic. And the more people who use a particular term, the larger that word becomes in the word cloud. So we're going to try that. We have one set up for 2 questions to see if it helps spark the discussion here. Each question is attached to a QR code, and that's going to take you to the word cloud generating poll. There you can enter the words that you think represent your ideas best. So here's the first one up on screen. If you have a phone or an iPad or something like that, just go ahead and shoot the QR code. If not, there will be, let's see, I'm going to read it out to you, I think. Oh, I don't see it here. I thought it was going to be in my feed, but somebody I'm sure will post in Mukana the actual link URL to it. And so basically what you want to do is keep your answers as concise as possible. One word works best. For example, if I was going to ask a question about what makes a bad sandwich, I might put in words like stale, dry, or even mustard if I happen to hate mustard, which I don't. But the point is that your answers need to be as clean as they can. You can put in a couple of words, but try to keep it as clean as you can. And then the more people who choose exactly the same response, the bigger the word gets in the word cloud. And then we're going to throw the word cloud results up in a couple of minutes and see what people think about the best way to keep engagement going. This first one, though, is the negative of that. What are the things you want to avoid in terms of your design of things that you see swiping by as you go through your different feeds and social media or whatever? What do you see that you don't like? What do we need to avoid just to not make mistakes on the content you're pushing out to people? So we're going to give it a shot. And in between that, I wanted to say hi to Ken Jordan, our resident web guru. Ken, do you have any thoughts as we start into this about a few things that you see as a professional web designer that people make mistakes on all the time?
Yeah, there are 3 kind of key things on a website. First thing is speed of loading, of it uploading. We work to get our website up in between 1 to maximum 3 seconds. Most websites on average 10. Every second extra that your website loads, you can expect a 10-20% drop off of people. So speed is a key thing. Next to being clean and uncluttered. Too much content, too many different bits of information, trying to fill your homepage with everything is a mistake. You give people too much choice, and they get no choice. They make no choice at all. So you try to keep everything kind of clean and uncluttered, and it needs to be simple and easy to use. If you've got a goal or an objective on your website, that should really be the only thing on the page that people land on. That's really the way to work to win on the web, anyway.
Do you have any metrics as to the most number of words you'll put on a landing page so you don't get that too much text thing going on?
Yeah, little few as possible. For example, in a menu, you really want to keep it below 6 options. More than that, and again, it becomes almost a word blindness, too much choice, and they can't then make a choice. See, on our menu, on our website, we have 3. You really want to minimize your menu options. So I say 6. The maximum is actually 7, but I will say 6 when the client insists on trying to get one extra one in. They do that.
That's very much in line with what I was taught about billboards. As somebody's driving by at 60 miles an hour on a freeway, we used to say, you've got 7 words max. And so it's interesting that this is the same way. It's just such a different behavior. I find myself amazed that I'm sitting there flicking through things and no. And maybe, 1 out of 50 or 60 attracts me enough to even want to spend the next couple of seconds there. So it's a pretty ruthless environment we're all having to navigate here. It looks
definitely.
like, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. Things have changed. What websites used to be 10 years ago to what they are now because of social media. People's attention span is a lot shorter, a lot smaller. So once you have got their attention, the thing is to do is how you keep their attention on your site. And, the worst thing to do is, for example, put your social media links on there, because then you're just taking them back off. Those social media sites spend millions on billions, and on terms of how to keep your attention on their site. So taking them back to that is, death. You really, once you've got them, you want to keep them. And there are a few things we'll talk about on the best way of doing that.
Okay, Alex, you have a few things to say, and then we'll pop up our first word cloud and see what that discussion that engenders. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, most of my focus is I let Ken worry about the website. so anyways, that's more my thing. My focus is mostly on content. Like, how do you keep people from leaving your content once you've created it? One of the things that we employ here is the biggest thing is just Q&A, interacting with the audience all the time. Polls are okay. It's very hard to do polls for very long before they feel forced. So you can do a poll if you're interested, or a couple polls here and there. Those are all things that are possible. But the biggest problem with most interaction that people create for their content is that it feels like someone told them they should do it, or it feels like it's very hard to do it in a natural way that has you feel like, that's a really, and so that's the hardest part. And so what we do is we interact. And most of the folks that are the most successful at live at least look at the comments. They'll sit there on Instagram, or they'll sit there on Facebook, or they'll sit there whatever, and they'll be trying to answer and say hi. And that's the key to gamers, and that's the key to a lot of things, is interacting with their audience, having them feel heard, answering their questions, posting, giving them some positive reinforcement. Even if when you show someone's name and address, or talk or refer to it, that's giving positive reinforcement. They got their moment, there, and people really enjoy that. And so they love being part of the show. And so the more and more you can make the audience part of the show, and we've done, and I'm not going to get into the long detail of it, but we've done things where even the audience is interacting with physical environment, using comments to actually do things in the environment. And that kind of thing, that just goes into the stratosphere, as far as if they feel like they can control something on a stage, from their comments and from their interaction, it gets pretty exciting, for them. And so, but questions help a lot. Giving them something that is a shared experience. We did a thing with Cards Against Humanity. It's called the Holiday Hole, where we were literally digging a hole for no reason, and you had to give us money, and it kept on getting more and more money just to keep digging. In fact, it said in the FAQ, it says, one of the things, why aren't you giving this money to charity? And their answer was, why aren't you giving this money to charity? You're paying them to do it. And what happened was, we saw, we didn't know that there was a cap in the number of interactions per minute on YouTube until we started getting close to the end. And what we had done is we created a 48-hour experience, and people were just checking in, and they got into a thing, and we gave them enough time to build a culture, and they were rating the big digger. When it came up, they'd be rating the quality of the scoop. You'd see a whole bunch of 9, 6, and then everyone would yell at the person who said 6, and then they were all being connected. And that's some of the stuff that we've learned on our way here. And so finding ways that we can effectively interact with the audience is probably the number one thing that will keep people in it, if they feel like it's engaging and it's actually not just something that's been written, something that's been scripted. Anything that feels scripted generally has a really hard time hanging on to folks from a live perspective. And if you're going to do it as a VOD, you have to really think about keeping it dense. we talk a lot about content density. How fast are we going to bring stuff to you? And people expect it in a TikTok world, in a YouTube world. People expect that information to be pretty tightly packaged. As soon as it gets slow, they move on. And and you have, on Facebook, you have 12 to 18 seconds of slow is usually about what it takes before they move on to another. Like literally, that's how long it takes before someone tends to move to something else on average. So you really have to keep it dense when you're building out live shows. And each live platform has different levels of, so YouTube is stickier because it's a place that you go for that event. Facebook is much less sticky, so you have to be much higher a much higher performer to keep people. Twitter is less sticky than Facebook, and it is it is so. Twitter has its own, like you have almost no time. In fact, you have so little time on content on Twitter that I'm not sure it's worth putting anything up more than images. That's the shortest one that we found. Twitch has a culture that is ready to just turn it on like TV. So you see average view times in the hours. To give you a sense of it, Twitter is usually well less than 30 seconds. So Facebook is oftentimes average view duration is oftentimes less than 30 seconds. So really good Facebook might be 2 or 3 minutes average view. YouTube tends to be higher. 6.5 minutes is a pretty good number there. Anything over 15 minutes or 30% of the show is actually considered a pretty high number for YouTube. But Twitch gets into, they start measuring things in hours, and it also just depends on where people can go, and how focused it is. Like, for instance, average view time is all I pay attention to, but average view time is on this show in YouTube is in the 20s, typically, high teens, low 20s on YouTube. Inside of Zoom, average view time is between 70 to 80 minutes. So it's,
let's sneak over to the results of what everybody pumped in. This was fascinating to watch it grow. If we can switch that on the screen, watching it grow and shrink, watching terms as people saw the terms increase size and decrease size. There is obviously a lot of variation here. I thought actually when I was thinking about doing this that it would be sensible to do it twice and see if people coalesced around ideas that they saw from other people. But you can see there's a lot of different information there that causes people to swipe away, to move away. And I just think it's fascinating to see there. The biggest ones, obviously, boring, busy, cluttered, slow, the speed, I like janky. But generally, that gives you an idea of what, as people are swiping through content, they feel do not serve their needs. Ken, does any of this surprise you at all?
Not really. As I said, the beauty of websites and what we build is we see this data in real time. We can see what works and what doesn't, what holds people's attention or not, and for how long, exactly for how long. So, it's, with the kind of information data we're giving out on here is based on, doing this for years and seeing the logs and seeing how things have actually changed. Speed is the biggest thing now. People's attention spans are so much shorter. So, it is really, it's really, really vital that when you've got their attention, when you've got them on your site, that you keep them there. And there are very simple ways of doing that. It's actually a lot simpler now than it used to be, because you really need to keep things really clean and simple. It's kind of different to what you would see in 99% of website themes out there, because they're built by designers for other web designers to show off to one another. They're not built by people who understand how people socially interact or the business models behind what really works.
I also keep seeing these swipe through sites where, you swipe to the next one and somebody's poised at the top of a bungee jump. And, obviously they've designed it that way to capture your attention. Are they going to leap? Are they not going to leap? And as I swipe through, I'm seeing more and more trends to kind of visceral experiences that really do command your attention for a second. And I will let those play a little longer, I have noticed lately, than things that are just a static billboard or text. Is motion and anticipation, are those kind of things becoming more important in keeping people on your content, Ken?
And while Ken's answering that, Bill, I'm going to take over for a little while you need to see if you can restart and see if you can get the sync issue sorted. Yeah,
Okay.
it's coming apart in the atmosphere. Anyway, go ahead. Ken.
Yeah, to answer that question, you've got to be careful of gimmicks if they're not related to your content. If you're, as long as it's relevant to the content that you have. But a lot of the time, people are adding things which, to grab someone's attention, and then it's not relevant to, what your content is or what you're trying to convey. Then they disappear and they're not going to come back. So you've got to be very careful. I wouldn't recommend doing that if it's not in line with what actually your content is.
I think that's always the trick. The trick is really to figure out a way to engage the audience and have them feel and do things that are interesting, but really in the context of what you're talking about, not something that feels like you're adding to it, but just something that is subtly serving you the next thing that you wanted to do, or the next thing that they want, to get out of that. That's great. Any other notes, Ken, before we move on to the questions? Can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. There are one or two, but a lot of the questions kind of bring that up. So okay. I'll answer with the question.
Excellent. Let's go to the first question.
All right. For Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, how do panelists use other social media channels to grab attention and bring in viewers to a live event, both pre-show and during the show?
Yeah, so a couple of things that we do in this area is, number one is that I tend not, now I want to say this and then we're going to do something completely different with office hours. I tend not to stream the same thing to all the things. Now we're going to do that so we can test a bunch of things around technology and video quality and viewership and everything else. So we're going to be, once we get through the what I'm calling the 2.5 conversion as we move to V2, we're going to be in another place there and we're going to start putting it on a bunch of different platforms. But generally we don't do that. Generally, what we do is we pick a site that we're going to do our live stream, and then we use the other sites to engage the audience. So that might be, going on Instagram and doing a little live, telling them, hey, this is behind the scenes. We're really excited. We're doing this. And let us know what questions you have. We're really excited to have you here. But we're going to be over, and typically we like to send them to a website as opposed to YouTube or something like that. It's just easier. I'm going to send you to a page like we had. What we promoted for IBC was a page of IBC. Now it's a YouTube, inside of that page, but it just is easier for them to find. And it's easier for them. Here's a simple link, get there, and that gets them back to your page. They're more likely to sign up to a mailing list. They're more likely to do a bunch of other things that allow you to develop that relationship. The other thing that we do is, and then we might use Twitter to tell people, hey, we've got this big event coming up. If you've got questions, put them on in, make them all, let's if you've got those questions, let's, let us know. And that doesn't feel as spammy as saying, we've got an event, we'd love to see you there. That's spammy. Asking them and telling them that there's an opportunity to interact, asking them to do those things feels much less spammy. And you do it a week before, a day before, like last minute, we're doing, and then you might even do a little hit from Twitter. Again, a little video hit from an Instagram, a Twitter. You might use Facebook as the post-show or the pre-show, of something where we're going to talk a little bit about something. We tend to use either a clear listed channel, something like Vimeo or something on a website, or we use YouTube for the main show or Akamai or something like that. Those tend to be, they're the highest quality video streams in my opinion. And so they just look better than the other channels. And then they also have the dwell time is much higher, in those environments. And so those are the things that we do to use these other social media areas, but asking the audience, again, just like everything else we're talking about with Q&A, asking the audience for their interaction, asking them for their opinions, asking them for their questions is just a key piece of making this actually work.
Cool. Hopefully that took care of my sync problem.
At the moment, I think Harshid was still on this question here.
Harshid?
I typically use Facebook, but I've used it because of since inception of it. So what I tend to do is use it within blind and vision impaired groups. And so if there's an event going, or if there's some kind of interesting key points, I usually post a message myself a couple weeks before, as Alex said, just to kind of vitalize the conversation and to see who's interested in a topic, and as well as if there's a bit or something that someone needs, we could address that ahead of time. So Facebook is the only one little one as a social media aspect that I use, but between that and YouTube, I think are the only two that I really relate to, and I'll pass it on.
Okay. I had hoped to get these two word cloud things done in the first 20 minutes. That was my design. Apologies for having internet problems today, but let's get to the second one, at least in terms of your entry. So we're going to clear that on the back end. And if you can just switch and do the same thing, same word cloud, but this thing, positive terms. And we're going to let about 5 minutes of discussion go by while you guys are entering in positive terms, what engages people, and then we'll go back to more questions. So, are you ready, Mitch? I know you're up there trying to shoot the QR code. It's the same location though. So if you had not closed it down, you should be refreshed and right there still. Sorry about that. I should have said that.
Me. That's quite all right. Juan C. Robles in Mexico City has a question. What considerations should I keep in mind when selecting a color palette to keep viewers' attention?
Ken?
Main thing is contrast. Contrast between your text and the background color. If you're doing you do have more options if you're on a light color in terms of the contrast in text. Obviously, we as I said, it favors very much dark background colors and then light text. But it's the contrast between the two, and there's some great free online tools that you should use when you're building a site to make sure that you do, and it will check and say that the contrast is good enough and sufficient enough, especially for accessibility readers as well. So contrast is one of the main things.
Excellent. Alex?
Definitely, saturated and bright colors in the event can get people's attention. I have a tendency to want people to be the most important part of every event that I do. And you'll see the result in that is that most of my everything that I work on is dark gray, gray, some version of gray, darker, less color. And the reason for that is it has people pop out. And when I don't do that, almost everything I do is focused on the people that are there, not anything else. And so we tend to want to move to cooler colors and darker colors and more neutral colors so that they don't compete with the people that are going to be part of the show.
Very nice. And Courtney?
Well, I agree mostly with what Ken says, complementary colors, which are colors from opposite ends of the spectrum. However, if you use the Japanese game show model, they leave no color left on the palette behind. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a cultural thing, but if you've spent any time watching Japanese television, their advertising and their game shows are the most attention-grabbing, every color possible in the gamut. And they certainly grab your attention, but I don't know how well that works because it's awfully busy. The frames are incredibly busy. There's lots of mortises and lower thirds and upper thirds and right there. It's going on all over the screen and in all kinds of colors. Maybe it's a cultural thing. I always thought the Japanese were very refined, and you think the Japanese tea house and everything, but their television is just off the charts.
Interesting. Hershey?
Yeah, I learned something this week. Some colors in the warm color palette can also be triggering. So I'm going to put this cloth here real quick just to give you an example. Now, having that cloth, sure, you could use that red background and you could put font on it, but it could be triggering with the color or the type of color it is. And so you have to be careful with, what you're using amongst different people. And cool colors just kind of give you a nice contrast. With black backgrounds, I would suggest you could use yellows and lime greens and all sort of brighter colors. So that's the contrast of cool colors with warm colors. That would work out better.
Excellent. Ken?
Yeah, just to Connie brought up a very good point about cultural things with color. So there are colors which of different in different cultures have a different meaning. So it's the as you're saying with the Japanese TV shows in terms of that color palette that's kind of used. So don't if your audience is global, then thinking that this color, because it works in Western cultures, might not necessarily have the same meaning in a different culture. So, but as I said, with office hours, you see it's very much lots of shades of grey. So we are very neutral.
And that's an interesting point because, colors do get associated with ideas, with feelings. Mitch, you had a thought?
Yeah, when we first decided to design our website for our company, secretagency.com, we decided to go black and white. And it's very interesting when on your advertising and in your website, you're using such, bleak colors. But when you add color to that in order to add emphasis to a word or to draw attention to a process or service, it really jumps out at you. So those kind of contrasts, I think, are important if you can get them.
And our second word cloud is ready. So here's some of the things you thought were particularly interesting or important in terms of terminology for a good website experience, a good website design. I don't see it. There it is. Now it's come up. And I can't read it yet because it hasn't refreshed on my screen. But what am I seeing? Oh, I know what it is because I had to go away. I didn't have that pinned to my screen. I'm sorry. That's an error, unforced error on my part. Let's see if I can get it pinned to second screen here. And there we go. So interesting, clean, focused, clear. It's interesting that clean came up on both. I guess there was an anti on the first slide, but people do not apparently like clutter. But that's interesting in terms of the discussion we were just having about the Japanese or Korean. A lot of those shows from the Pacific Rim have a lot of visual information, and I would describe some of the interfaces I've seen as cluttered, yet it kind of works there. So, but for those of you who are interested in ideas, here's a bunch of things that you can kind of glom onto as things that might be a positive aspect. All right, let's dive back into the questions. Next question.
And it's coming in from Andy Kokendorfer. How effective are prizes at gaining and retaining audience? Comparative studies? Thanks.
Ken, you want to start us off and we'll go to Alex and Mitchell?
Again, they do work, but there are in certain districts or certain countries, there are legal requirements if you're giving prizes away. So you've got to be very careful on some of those. But again, I wouldn't rely upon it. I wouldn't use it as, it's, you, again, a prize. People will come to your website just to do the prize draw or something rather than to read your content. So, it kind of goes with kind of in the gimmicky camp, not to use, those one-off hits to kind of gain an audience, because it doesn't work in terms of retention or people feeling trusted in terms of your website, or they're already coming there just because you're holding a prize draw. That might not be the best. It's not the best way of kind of retaining a real audience and getting across what information you actually really want to get across.
Mitchell?
I think Ken is very diplomatic on answering that question. Don't do it. It's just the wrong way and the wrong reason that you want people coming to your website. You completely deflect the message about what your unique product or unique service that you're offering and distracting it with money or prizes or something else. You're not a prize company, unless you're a prize company, in which case it's a great idea.
And Alex?
So I would say it depends. So the issue is that they can be very popular to build up of audience, and you may only end up keeping or using a small percentage of that audience. But if you get a large flow, 1% of a large flow might be bigger than 100% of a small flow. So you just have to kind of think through that. If you look at someone like Mr. Beast is a good example on YouTube. I mean, he built what he does, and he continues to expand it by giving things away. And he's almost seen as this, just this daddy warbucks that just throws money around, because he does literally throws money around, and throws around. And he's, built up something that is pretty amazing based largely on giving things away. So, and I have to admit that I probably would have leaned more towards what Mitchell said until I was really studying what Mr. Beast is doing. And he does a pretty good job of taking some revenue and then re-spreading it. He gave someone an island, like a whole island. Then he gave away, like, I think more hamburgers a week ago than has ever been given away or ever bought or whatever. There's still lines at his hamburger shop in New Jersey. So anyway, there's so I think that there are places that can be there. What I really like are giving away things that are very connected to the event. So it's not like I'm just giving away something. I'm giving you an artifact in which you can remember the event. A lot of us go to events and we get lanyards, backstage passes that were connected to the event that we almost all of us keep. There's just like these, some of us have 1,000 of them or 2,000 of them sitting on some hook, and they're all just this big, and it's kind of a trophy room, for events. And it's, you see it all over the world. I've been in Zimbabwe and walked into someone who does events, and everybody keeps the lanyards, and so you look at things like that. And, we used to give some of those to, people who were attendees, and they thought that they were really cool because they'd never seen one before. And so there's a lot of those kinds of things. So giving people something that makes them feel like they're connected to the event, I think is better than just trying to do big giveaways. So. But I will not say that they don't work. I mean, I think that like Final Cut User Group in LA, that was like a big piece of what everyone waited for at the end of the show, was that there was going to be a giveaway that to me was incredibly painful to watch. But it was very, very effective.
Before you go on, I had a client who was a Cadillac dealer, and 63% of their customers paid cash. They did literally just write a check for a top-end Cadillac. So they were not without resources. We gave away a silly little key fob with the catalog logo and free hot dogs. And those people in that line scammed and worked to get more hot dogs. I've never forgotten that lesson, that everybody can get competitive about free stuff and everybody can get engaged with it. Ken?
Yeah, there's a difference between holding a prize draw to a giveaway. Giveaways are fine. A prize draw where you're asking people to, give their email address and to spread that so that you on their own social channels, so that there's a prize. That's a very different and more negative thing than a giveaway. They're two very different things. And so giveaways, I think fine, but it's the prize draw kind of gimmick is more the kind of thing that I was saying is more against than the giveaway side.
Okay, Mitchell?
A very popular plugin manufacturer that we like very much here constantly offers an alternative price that's substantially lower week over week. And in a sense, that's sort of a giveaway. But the problem with it is I think it devalues the quality of their product, because they're saying, well, 1 minute it's worth this much, and next week it's worth this much. So it in the back of your mind, I think it has the opposite effect of helping out.
Absolutely. Next question.
Next question from Juan C. Robles in Mexico City. Flashing versus static content.
And I put myself in here because I want to just make the point. I've been schooled for a long time that for some people with certain disorders, flashing content can literally trigger epileptic episodes and things like that. So I just always say no to myself unless it's so minor, like an inline thing I want to draw somebody's attention to. If you're doing full screen flashing stuff or even large flashing stuff, just be mindful of that. It can be medically damaging to some people. Mitchell.
Yeah, big point there, Bill. Appreciate that. Look at Flash. I mean, when it first came out, it was crazy. I mean, everybody was doing single frame montages in order to announce their website. What does that do to sell your product? It doesn't. It's distracting. It's annoying. And yes, you may look at it, but you may look at it like an oncoming car in the wrong lane.
Courtney?
Yeah, I've always considered flashing things annoying more than attention-getting. I would avoid flashing at all possible. The only thing I would have interchangeable or transitioning on your website would be mouse interaction. So to indicate that as you mouse over something, it could change color to indicate that it's a clickable hotspot. But other than that, I would stay away from flashing.
Yeah, I think that's the general consensus here. I mean, a highlight is not really the kind of flashing I think that triggers people who have those photosensitive disorders. But boy, it can be dangerous. Next question.
From Eric Billings in Washington, D.C. For videos, have there been successful attempts to use changes in frame rate to subconsciously keep their attention?
Alex.
There are studies that I don't think I can point to directly. They're not external studies that show that higher frame rate. I didn't believe this because I was doing everything at 24 and 30, but higher frame rate does result in higher average view duration, AVD. Yeah.
Nice. Courtney?
Well, I was looking at this as another way of perceptible frame rate change, which has been used to death. It's so much it's been, cliche. It's called the speed ramp, and they use it a lot in television shows. To give something an edge. They'll speed up and they'll move to a certain point, and then they'll go back to normal speed. Then they'll speed up and move back down. Those are perceptible speed changes. They're used to move the action along or transition between one location and another location, or one position and another position, or to collapse time. But as imperceptible, I don't think it's going to even work in streaming media, because your frame rate will vary depending upon the viewer's connection speed.
And Alex?
Also, dramatic frame shifts in speed tend to be not handled very well by temporal compression. So it's expecting a certain number of things, and suddenly things change, and you end up seeing just skipped frames, as it goes. If you're in a WebRTC solution, if you're in a streaming, some streaming solutions, it really just depends on the platform. But I think that we are definitely seeing that there is some kind of connection as we increase that. 60 seems to be kind of an awful in between, but when we start going up higher, it really has people just engage in a way that we don't see in other formats.
Hey, Ken, I'm curious, is the embeddability of off-speed frame rates in websites a thing? Is it a challenge, or is it easy to do, or are there standards that we should prepare for as we're embedding stuff on websites these days?
Not really. The problem with a lot of embeds, not so much about frame rate, is the embeds add a lot of weight to the website because they're trying to gather a ton of information from them. So that's what you see with our YouTube embeds. We use a very different way of doing it. They don't slow down our website. It's less about from a frame rate point of view than more from a issue of adding a lot of external weight to the website, basically slowing it down by embedding content. You've got to be very careful on how you embed from third-party suppliers.
And as a webmaster, are you doing the transcoding in the back end, or are you asking your vendors to do that for you?
Well, we're not doing any of that. We said the only embeds for example, on Office Hours, we have hundreds of YouTube embeds, but they don't slow down our webpage because of the way that we embed YouTube videos into that. So,
nice. Yeah. So there are ways to do it that are better. Next question.
Next question from John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. How would you approach attention management differently when the goal is instruction versus community building versus making a sales pitch?
Alex.
So I think that making the sales pitch and the instruction are very close together, because with making a sales pitch, you need to get to the point quickly, and you need to say, you have a very small amount of time to get before someone's going to go somewhere else. You need to make sure you're answering their questions, you're answering them succinctly, you're answering them effectively, and that feels very much like education. And so now the big difference with all of those, you want to branch, so this is one video. I really become more and more strongly opinionated about the fact that I think that lots of small videos that act seamlessly and let you kind of find what you need is a really great way to build content for education and for content marketing and for sales. So that I can see what I want quickly. And then there's other options there for me to go to other things that, if you're interested in this, I'll give you more of these. We built hundreds of these for some of our partners, sometimes in some cases thousands of them, that are all 5 to 8 minutes long at max, oftentimes 3 to 4 minutes. And this was over 15 years ago. That's all my company. We didn't do live. All we did were short videos that were educational and marketing for these types of things. What we tended to refer to it as, from a marketing perspective and from an education perspective, is wetware. The idea that, there's hardware development, there's software development, and the wetware development. Wetware is training your users to use your product the way you designed it. And so to make sure that they understand where all the buttons are, and it probably adds almost as much value, in some cases more value, than the hardware and software development. Because, and the example that I always use is that I have a microwave, and I don't care what the name is on the front of the microwave, because all I know how to use is power and time. Because there's a bunch of things they spent millions of dollars on. I don't know how to use them because their documentation is horrible. So when I go to get a new microwave, I'm not looking for that microwave. I'm just looking for one that fits in the box and does power and time. Now, if there was a thing that engaged me and showed me how to do great cooking and how to do all these other things, I'm much more likely to buy that again. Heston does this exceptionally well. They make these pans that cook, that you can measure the heat on your phone. By itself, that product is not very valuable. The fact that they have hundreds of recipes that use that pan, that show you how to make things better and show you how to cook, is the thing, and incredible videos. They're probably the high watermark in looking at how training can be tied into a piece of hardware. As far as community building, I think it goes the other way. I think you spend more time. You look at after hours. You want to have places where people can dwell more with each other. And I think that builds community. Like that connects people, is time. So I think that's a slightly different model. And of course, within office hours and after hours, we're using both.
Nice. Next question.
And the next question from Colin Mulcahy in Dublin, Ireland. Speaking of websites, any thoughts on using tools like motion.page animations, GSAP? Is it a trend, or is it something that is worth adding as user experience?
And Ken Jordan.
It's a trend. You'll see loads of these kind of trends coming along. Really, they kind of take away from what your focus really should be, is on building more engaging content. Nothing wrong with putting in doing some basic animation on there, but most of the time it just detracts from what your message is. But there are you'll see hundreds of these different types of trends that they try to add, or gimmicks they try to add onto a website, and most of the time, at best they're just distracting, and at worst they slow down your website and make your audience click away.
Is there any way to turn around the fact that it seems to me that the online experience is getting more and more cluttered and harder to navigate literally every time I go on somewhere? And no matter what service that I use, I find myself swiping and swiping, looking for something interesting, and I can never find it. The other thing that drives me crazy, and I'd like maybe, Ken, for you to weigh in on this, is that I will see something and I will swipe past it thinking, no, I'm not interested, but then it'll tickle me a little bit later. And I can never get back to where I was once I make that instantaneous decision to go past it. Is there any solution for that kind of thing?
Again, it's the solution is very simple. It is to keep everything very much clean and uncluttered, because then it's very much easier there for you to navigate back to where something is. The trend of trying to put just everything onto the one page, rather than the real key is that if someone's come to your page from some external marketing that you've put on a social channel, you just need to answer the question that they clicked on to come there in the first place, and that is it. Then after that's been answered, or your call to action is then you make the direction of where they should be going next. Because if you give them a bunch of choices, it's like, well, you don't know which one they should choose. So how is the audience supposed to know which one of those they should choose? You should really be guiding people along so that it reaches whatever goal that you have set when they land on that page. But yeah, it really, the trend is to kind of add more and more when really we should be adding a lot less, and specificity is really the key. That's really the simple answer. Be very specific on what your message is, and when they land there, you answer the question that they the reason why they went there in the first place. And if you do that, you will get a much higher level of engagement and less likelihood of them bouncing away to something else.
Great advice. We have room for a couple more questions if people have it on this specific topic, but we have a next one. So next question.
And it's from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, PA. What analytics are available to get feedback about your website's effectiveness? How can we interpret these metrics?
And Ken Jordan.
Yeah, the biggest tool is Google Analytics. It is a brilliant tool, and I'm moving away from using it because of Google tools, and really stripping back and being much more simple. Because if your page is very simple and has a very simple goal, it's then very easy to measure that. The great tools that Google give you is a big reason behind it. They give you these massive free tools is because they do collect data to make their advertising that much better. Unlike Facebook, Facebook knows your name and address, because your name and where you live, because you put that into it when you log in. Google doesn't know that, but it actually knows the way that it can, from your interaction online, it knows even more about you. We used to do a lot of Google Analytics, and we used to spend ages kind of going in and basically just analytics to death, or over-analyzing everything. Once you strip things back and keeping it simple, you can just look at your web logs, because all the data is there anyway, and there are some much simpler ways of doing that measurement, which gives you the answer to a more key thing. Is you've got a call to action on that page, how many people landed on the page, and what percentage of them clicked on that call to action. You don't need Google Analytics to do that. There are simpler ways of doing that, and it gets your focus back onto the most important thing, on making more engaging content. And that's the real key. And building a page, you can build multiple pages with a very specific call to action, and then you can see which one of those works best, because your users will tell you, and then you build from that. So yeah, we are rapidly moving away from those great tools that they give you, and it meant we just have much more time now to focus on writing better copy, making our call to actions better, and by moving away from those beautiful analytical tools, we've actually seeing higher return rates, because we simplified things rather than complex.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a highly metriced, highly studied world we're in now, as opposed to when I started in advertising. We used to do things like direct mail, and if you got 1% to 2% return because you were blasting out 10,000 pieces, you were considered highly successful in that. But now, as things get more and more targeted, I think what I'm hearing from Ken, and it strikes me with the same thing I've been reading about those old industries I used to play in, was that you want to send out less stuff, but to more qualified stuff, and figure out who you're truly trying to target, and come up with strategies for not trying to put out a message to everybody in the hopes that you get just a few of them to come back. Next question. Oh, wait a second. Alex wanted to weigh in on that. Sorry, Alex.
Well, all I was going to say is that you're right. And I think a lot of people, for that focused area, a lot of times when you're in meetings, when they talk about ads for Google or Facebook, if you're talking to someone there, they're talking about multipliers. What's the multiplier of how much money you put in to how much money you got out? And the multipliers oftentimes are pretty stunning. Like, it's not like 25%, it's like multipliers of 3, 5, 8, because They're, they have that data. I think that the problem is that this is about to go away. Like that Apple is leading a movement to basically cut everybody out. Like, just to be clear, like, this isn't like a little, everyone thinks, well, this is, look at what Apple did. No, look at what they're doing. They're probably 25% into this path, and they're basically going to take all the Apple users out of the ecosystem for everyone. And we're going to have the option to stay in, but right now, 70 to 80% are saying no. So we don't want to do that. And we're going to keep on getting those options, and we're going to keep on taking them. So I think that that's going to be a real problem for a lot of the kinds of advertising. It gets back to what Ken was talking about of needing to have more authentic communication focused on your audience and doing service without necessarily relying on as much data as you had before, because you may not have it. As far as the raw data, one of the things that, as far as videos go, that we pay a lot of attention to is the different graphs that we see. So average view time, we want to see how long they stayed. When, like looking at things like when you see something like this in your view and you see something like going like this, what happened here? Like, why are people, like what was I talking about that had that be an interest? Or what happened when this happened? This is by the way, boring content, right? This is people just slowly said, oh, I'm done, with that. If you see this, for instance, they came expecting something different than what they got, and a huge chunk of them left. And also, so that's a big indicator there. If you see, this is kind of it kept on getting better, or you kept on adding more people and you weren't losing people. Usually we're just happy with this, which is that you're not adding, or you're staying at equilibrium at some point. Now, if you see something like this and then you see it go up like this, you look at here and you look at the other social networks. So you're like, okay, what was posted? Because usually this is a Twitter post, like that's or something even more like, if it goes up like this is almost always someone posting on Twitter. And that's really popular. It's got lots of people in it because suddenly everyone just came in. Now, the thing is, the question is, can you hold on to them? So they go like this. And if it goes like this, that means your content wasn't sufficient. There's a whole bunch of people that were told something when they got there. They stayed for a little while, and then they all started deciding, well, this isn't really what I thought it was going to be, or this isn't that interesting, and they went away. So, all these graphs are things that we look at, and we build little reports for clients, of like, this is what happened. And we identify with little arrows, like, this is what happened here. This is what happened here. This is the indicator for here. So we pay a lot of attention to that raw data.
All right, let's go to the next question.
Stefan Fischer from Würzburg, Germany. We had one-page websites in the last years. Was this only a trend, or is there more to it?
Ken Jordan.
There's more to it now. I mean, one-page websites now are really, if you've got a single product or you're selling a single service, you can do it all on a one-page website. The growth of mobile phone users going to your website, it's trend now is something like 70-odd%, if not more, depending on your subject, of your users are coming on a mobile phone. So a single page, it can be as long as, but people have no issue on a phone, going to a website and constantly scrolling. So it's less of an issue. So one page of websites for single products or single ideas or single services are perfect. Yeah, they work well for your audience, and you have to keep them simple because it's if you keep them as a single column, because that's how they said the majority of your audience is going to be viewing that content. It keeps everything very much simple and easier to navigate.
Mitchell, real quick.
Yeah, essentially, I agree with Ken, because I think if you can't state your proposition, what your value proposition is, selling a service or a product, on one page, on one screen, then you're going to lose them. Because the next step is that people have to interact with the site in order to get somewhere or to read. They're not going to read. They're not going to read, and they're not going to scroll. They're not going to be looking for what your proposition is. You have to present it, and you have to do it right quick up front.
Stefan and Courtney, real quick.
Yeah, satisfying answers.
And Courtney.
I hate the doom scrolling where you come up to a simple page and you don't know where to go, and there's no idea where to navigate to find the stuff you want to find. And you have to start scroll. Oh, I can scroll down and 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 down, and then you find something 22 pages down that you want to click on. It takes you out to another website. Then you come back, and now you're back at the top again. You can't find out where you came from. So leave breadcrumbs.
That drives me nuts. Next question.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, PA, and Josh asked, how has engagement been enhanced by modern technology and functionality of the modern web browser? What gimmicks, in your opinion, have hurt engagement? How is the warning for developers just because we can doesn't mean that we should?
Alex.
I think just a lot of the same stuff we talked about earlier, the giveaways, the bright, like, you got to check this out, things blinking, like all the stimulus, that's how you build something that's a fast turn. And people are going to make money at it. They're going to do it, but it creates a lot of inflation of expectation, inflation of what of what stimulus you expect. And it's really hard to maintain, and so I think that those are some of the things you have to be very careful of. We've taken a very conservative approach of, we're just going to slowly build this out and slowly, build out a foundation that is built on rock instead of sand.
Courtney, real quick.
The pop-up is the bane of websites and advertising. And when they came up with the pop-up, there's now a whole business of pop-up removal tools. So,
and anything that plays like automatically, like
anything that takes over your interface.
And definitely anything that creates audio. Like if something creates audio without me asking, I will never go back to that website. Like it is an immediate nope, because because I get surprised. Like I'm sitting there with a bunch of other people and I'm surfing around because I'm bored, and suddenly there's a bunch of stuff. And so that no, don't do that.
And Ken, since you're our resident expert here, what's happening?
Yeah, for us in Europe, and GDPR had meant you see a lot of pop-ups with a cookie policy or cookie agreeing to this. You see, we don't have that in office hours, and we are 100% GDPR compliant because we have no trackers. And that's why moving away from tools like Google Analytics means I don't have to then have a pop-up with people having to click on to consent to that, because we run no trackers. And that's really the trend is going obviously the other way because of GDPR, but you can be 100% GDPR compliant without the need for tracking.
That's wisdom right there. Next question, last question.
Last question from JT Ruba in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Is there a rule of thumb for broadcast about how long to hold a scene view before swiping to a graphic or different angle to retain viewers' attention?
Alex?
It's really quality of what you're doing, the quality of the content. I don't think it's a scene can. I mean, definitely the trend has been to cut faster, but it doesn't always have to be that way if something is presenting itself, in the frame. Some people can watch a single image for a long time. News does this all the time, a helicopter shot where everyone's talking underneath it, giving it context. So I don't think that's the case. I will tell you that we did some research over a decade ago, and definitely found that if a person in a webinar or in a training talks for more than 6 to 8 minutes, and that was kind of the range that we saw. The knee was 6 to 8 minutes, and the active viewership, people actually watching the event, dropped by over 70% or 75%. In those 2 minutes, they just got tired of it. And the more confronting thing was if you put up a slide for more than it's 60 to 90 seconds for a slide. So if you put up a slide, people will push you to the side. And it doesn't mean they're not listening at all, but they're not really paying attention anymore. You're now competing with their email, you're competing with other things. So you really need to keep that in mind when you're putting up stuff for video content.
And Courtney, real quick.
If you're talking about scripted or narrative type, a TV show or that is telling a story, then it depends on the action and the storyline and what you're doing. A fight will, of course, have a lot of quick cuts in it to accentuate the action. A long, pensive moment will have a slow moves in it and no fast transitions, and dissolves between points of view to keep you from taking you out of the emotionality of the moment. So it depends on where you're going with the storyline and the emotion of the particular scene.
Well said. We made it. Congratulations, everybody. Thank you so much. And a particular thank you to all the panelists who come here every day and show up to help make this conversation what it is. I want to reach out and say specific thanks to Ken, because I asked him to come in today, and I know your expertise is absolutely key to this discussion. It's great to have you here, and I hope we see you more often, as much as you can allow us your time. But every panelist contributed to this, and I thank you all for showing here. Also to everybody on the back end, and as the credits roll here in just a second, you will see a lot of names. Does take a village to put on a show like this, and it's a pretty big one. So pay attention to the people who are helping you do that. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for watching.
Now I'm going to go back to installing ZoomISO on everything.
It's said it takes a village to raise children.
Exactly. It turns out it takes a village to raise the adults too.
And I need more teachers.
And more grandmas.
It turns out it just takes a village. It doesn't now. No, it doesn't have to be all in the same place anymore. We've proven the village can be global.
Virtual village.
Exactly.
That's a small township.
I just got a message from my producer. She